I'm here with James Crowe, who's the Green Party candidate for Napier. James, kia ora, and thanks for chatting with me.
Kia ora, morena. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you again. This is not your first rodeo or campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Last time you came quite a distant third, with about 1950 votes, 1,950 personal votes, and about nearly 2,500 party votes.
Wonderful.
Did you achieve what you set out to achieve?
I did. I wasn't standing, nor am I again standing to be an MP. I'm standing to be a conduit and a community-based representative for the Green Party. So I'm fully invested in the policies and the party. This is what I believe in.
Yeah.
But my job within the party, and as a member, is not to try and push myself to the top of a ranking system. And again, this time I'm actually not on the list. I was here during the floods and couldn't attend, so the rules didn't allow me to be on the list. But the purpose is the same. If someone needs to talk to me in Napier about Napier issues, then the Greens perspective, then that's what I'm here to do for 3 months. And for the rest of the 3 years, outside elections, I'm still in the community and still chat with people. So I was happy with the result, and it got us more MPs. And we just need to push harder this time, and also reassure Green members locally that we're still thinking about the community across the Greater Hawke's Bay. And I think that's what I'm showing, is I'm back again to be that relationship partner for the community.
Yeah, because I noticed you weren't on the list, but Nick Ratcliffe in the Tuki is on the list. I think he's number 20 or 19.
I think he's on my 25.
Oh, something like that.
That was my number last time, which again I asked to be at the bottom of the list. We have a young family and commitments to community and to our small business. And so we weren't there for that. As many aren't on the Green list. They're really there to help just spread the message and be available during the election. And that's important. That's important because we are a party that gets in based on its party vote. So I was happy with that number. And we do want to see that number stay strong and just give confidence to our Green community, which is larger than our membership locally. It really is people who come out and support. And that's what we're here to do again.
What do you do about the wasted personal vote? Because if you've got nearly 2,000 people voting for you.
It is. And look, this is a challenge that I think a lot of parties face, is that a two-tick campaign, or seeing the person, believing in the person, I would look at that as those 1,900 or so votes saying, we wanted to give it to you more than anybody else. And I say thank you, but at the same time, we'd always love people to think strategically around the government they want to see. And you will never see a Green-only government in New Zealand. We will be partners, as we have been, with other parties that are like-minded. And that's the same balance that I think people should think about with their party vote. And with their member vote. So if you want the MP you want to see in your community, support them. I'll still be in the community regardless. But I think, there's definitely a dynamic around party vote versus candidate vote. But some people just want to do those two ticks, and they can still do that. But I am on the Māori roll. I'm on the Māori roll, so I can't vote for myself.
Okay.
I forget that every time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you suggesting to people that they give their candidate vote to possibly Labour and then party vote to you?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think if you don't want to put it somewhere else, put it with us. That we're a party built on protests and actions. If you want to send that message to other larger parties, give it to me. That clearly says you need to work harder if you want my party vote. But otherwise, my candidate vote. But really, if we want to see a government that continues to progress, we do need partners. And we've successfully worked in and outside cabinet with Labour, but we work better in cabinet. So we need that party vote for Green, and we need to see a good MP for Napier. And at the same time, we need to see a really dynamic government that people can hold to account, and that's what we're there for.
Now, what did you learn from your last campaign, and what are you doing differently this time?
I think the most important thing is that I entered the election last time as relatively new to being involved in the political process of the Green Party. I've stayed really strong within that for the 3 years. So I've been the local co-convener. I've seen the adaptation and the change within the party. I've seen how we've dealt with issues, which has been healthy. And I've seen the enshrinement of Te Tiriti o Waitangi into our processes and policies, and that's been a really healthy system. If I didn't feel that we have a party that can actually move through challenges, and there always will be, some we can foresee, some we can't, I wouldn't still be with the party and supporting its message. So I back the party, and I back being the representative for Napier as well. So I've learnt that it's still a strong, healthy whānau collective, the Greens, and that can do really great things as long as we're given the right tools. We've been outside cabinet. It's been much harder this time than it was in the previous 3 years because we actually had ministers who had real clout, and we want to return to that position. So if you want to see some of those areas, we just pick environment, but we have really strong policies you've seen around economics and social, health. You do need to help us get back into cabinet, and that means we need that strength in our vote, in our party vote.
Now, obviously, the cyclone has changed everything. Mm-hmm. How do you factor that in your campaign? Not just the rebuild, but also obviously the climate change aspect of it. How have you factored that into your campaign?
Yeah, that's fascinating. So the gap between, say, COVID, which was an unexpected reality disaster, we've had forecasting for 20, 30 years saying this is what's coming, and sort of now the rubber's meeting the road. We're now dealing with the issues that have been forecasted, and we know these issues will become stronger based on scientific forecasting. So if we don't actually act and continue to act in ways that protect from now to 2050, we're going to end up in an even worse position. And we can only recede from the ocean so far. We can only lift so many houses. We can only accept so much of our region becoming, say, non-arable or unable to rebuild before we do have to say, okay, well, how long will the hurt go on before we actually start to cut some of those emissions more aggressively? We need to sort of take some of the hurt now, whereas we seem to keep pushing it down the road. Our party wants to move stronger on that, but again, it's very difficult if we're shining a light on it, but we don't act as the majority party, and if we're outside cabinet, it's very difficult. So I think a lot of the policies that we will bring through will mean that people have economic support to allow them free thinking and time to think, how can I help the community versus how do I pay the rent? And at the same time, when we do things like the rebuild, we do want to see the types of houses and the building structures being used not just meet sort of a 2050 goal, because currently it's sixfold the amount of emissions coming off the types of rebuild you would see with new houses. So we're actually going to put ourselves still continually behind the curve on the 1.5 degree. So it'd be very quick to say let's rebuild, and let's rebuild better, but better also means we need to look at how we build our houses and that they're future-proofed, not just in warmth and guarantees of security, so you can own a home or rent a home, but also the idea that that home won't, say, require additional painting and refurbishing and adjustments over the next 30 years to meet that 1.5 degree climate lift. Yeah. So I think there's a lot to consider. Yeah. But we are really at an epicenter, as is Auckland. I mean, that was unheard of. I lived through Cyclone Bola, and as a child, and for me, I remember it was just the time when the waves really lashed the beach. Yeah. My children now growing up, they will not think that what happened in Auckland or here was that memory. They saw houses flooded. They saw people. Well, it was different
because this time the sea didn't play any part in. No. In that, it was all down rivers.
We were very lucky. Yeah. Yeah. And the flooding in Auckland, is, to my reference, was the impact of the storms and the amount of water that we have to deal with is now more in a tropical environment, not a subtropical. And I think we've often built our houses around that idea that we're a relatively warm, comfy country, which we're not. At the same time, we've built our infrastructure on the idea that we're a relatively dry country with mild rainfall, and we're not. And we're not anymore. And so I think this area, especially because we rely on our arable land so much, is not only are we losing access to housing, but also to incomes for families and support to grow the region, which is a big goal, of course. So we have to do that in a smart way, or we'll find ourselves in the same position for our next two generations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now's the time.
Yeah. Now, what other issues are you campaigning on, especially locally, apart from what you just mentioned now?
Yeah, well, I think from
you personally, not necessarily the party.
Me personally. So I have. So my background is through sort of innovation, through food products, things that help people with their diet, help them to improve their lifestyle, and also don't have impact on the environment. So a lot of the things we see in the Hawke's Bay have those opportunities as well, and there's been great innovation around that. So something I speak to is how do small businesses start and not fail, and can actually meet some of the new demands, which they are challenges, and they will continue to be challenges unless they're addressed in a innovative way. So trying to support the kind of industry that could grow in the Hawke's Bay that doesn't require necessarily huge amounts of water, huge amounts of power, huge amounts of trees, as a resource, but allow the new future companies that build here and the families who come to the Hawke's Bay to be able to access the kind of tools and resources they need. And I think that's really where warm, safe, accommodated families and individuals start to create more wealth and support for our communities.
Yeah.
So I think that's an area that I feel that I've seen with the people I employ and the way that we deal with the living wage, and we act on issues around better health outcomes, better support for them and their families. I think if we see that in the Hawke's Bay, that means that the next generations growing up will have more opportunity and not necessarily have to leave and go to more dense communities where, let's say, there's more technology investment and support for ideas that don't require a lot of planting and pulling, which is an important category, but we do need to say, how do we plant it, pull it, innovate it, change it? And at the same time, at the other end, we've got a heavily aged community that should and will stay in our community. And so our hospital and our infrastructure around that is quite serious. And also our Māori and Pacifica, as we've seen, the way that's managed, and I think there's been 7 years of reporting around some of the issues with how our health system in the Hawke's Bay and wider can manage those. And so we need to make sure that everyone's lifted up and supported with their need, but also highlighting their need as effectively, so we don't see people dying. We don't see people going worse into worse outcomes.
Now, as you know, election campaigns can be quite brutal and a bit of fighting between the candidates.
I've heard that. But
And you sort of identified yourself as someone who wants to debate the policy, and I think there are at least two other candidates, Mark Hutchinson from Labour and Katie Nimmin from National, who have also said that they just want to debate the policy and not the person, and not play the ball, not the man. Do you think that's important for voters, that candidates do that?
I think it's very important that we don't lean too hard on one or the other. The idea that, for example, I wouldn't hold a conversation with you, and when it came to a certain line, I would just turn my head away and walk off. I think the conversation has to be had at an individual level. But when we're talking to a wider community, it is good that we focus on the policies. But I think when we're dealing with individuals, as our new MP will do, they will have people walking into that office, and ideally now we'll have someone with more time in the community. You'll want them to deal with that person face to face and not say, well, please wait for the next press release to let you know how you're going to be supported with your issue. So I think it's a horses for courses, to say playing the ball. But yeah, I would like the idea that we don't just sort of lean on ideological fears or let's say concerns that may be outdated if we test them against history and science. I think it's good to actually look at it and also just say, look, we should be available to talk and have kōrero that's not hinged on the fact that for 3 months of the 3 years I have a green, but the rest of the time I'm in my community. If someone I see, whether it be through a social channel or somewhere else that needs help or conversation, I'm not going to think, well, I'm not a candidate for a party right now. That's not, I think, how any of the candidates work. So we should challenge them to that. But it is good to see it stay a healthy, clean game.
Now, obviously you mentioned your background in that, and excuse me saying this, but you're not your typical green candidate. I mean, you just mentioned you're a business owner, and that's a little bit different from a lot of other sort of candidates. Tell us a bit about your background and how you align with how you formed your identity with the Greens.
And I suppose, first of all, too, I think that the Green Party itself is changing, and all parties are constantly changing. And what's been fascinating to me is that there are more people who work within businesses or who run their own companies or invest in systems that are going to help in the community with a green mindset who are part of the Green Party. Some may not have the time to offer themselves as candidates, just that's important to say, but there are a lot of people actually, it is a very diverse party, and it's easy to say, well, bloody greenies, they do what they do, and but those boxes probably don't help. But yes, I've been acknowledged even by the party at times that I'm quite different from some of their candidates, but at the same time, as I think you've addressed, I walk the walk and walk the talk, I should say, because I like to follow the best outcome and the best answer. And if I look at an issue, and maybe my upbringing, I had dyslexia as a child, I sort of question things, I tilt my head to the side and think, well, that doesn't feel right. If I follow what doesn't feel right, and I have a really wonderful marriage, we question everything, our children, we share everything with them, and we come up with ideas. And if you think, well, it's fair to pay your staff less than it clearly requires for them, for example, to get by, well, you can't explain that to your children. Well, why don't they get enough? Well, because we need more, or we have better needs or more needs, or we started the business so we deserve more. Actually, if you rationalise it, no, it's fair to try and help your staff.
So you pay your staff a living wage?
We've paid our staff living wage within our businesses since inception. So we were a founding company within living wage because we were doing it already. It just made sense.
Yeah. So what is your business?
So my original business was a plant-based ice cream. It's called Little Island, and organic ice blocks. So we started a business in Auckland that made fun summer treats, but they were healthy. They had fair trade ingredients. They just did things that people were happy to pay a little more for.
Yeah.
At the same time, we were asking friends and whānau to come and work for us. So we would not pay those people less than what we thought was fair to come and crack in with us and start this idea. So by the time living wage came around, they said, you need to pay, I think it was $20.65, and we said, we already pay $20.50.
Yeah.
So chuck 15 cents on and we're off to the races, and we've continued that now for the best part of 8 years.
And so you're on to other businesses now?
Yes, because that's in Auckland. We moved 7 years ago to the Hawke's Bay, 5 years ago, 2017, to the Hawke's Bay. My wife has family here, and she has heritage here. I actually come from Te Atiawa, so Taranaki, but been in Auckland all my life, raised there. And we moved down here and the same thing. You look for opportunities, and so I'm now involved in other food, beverage, community engagement ideas that are based in the Hawke's Bay because that's where I want to live and work, and that's where our family are educated and growing up.
Yeah. Now, how do you get through to people who see, as you mentioned, bloody Greens, the Greens who they think they want to tax the middle class and the wealthy, they want to make us all vegans, and they want to destroy farming as we know it. How do you actually explain to people that that's not your agenda, or is it your agenda?
No. And first of all, no agenda. I'm criticised for that sometimes. I don't have enough of agenda. I just sort of say, well, what do you want to talk about? But at the same time, I've never met that person, and I'd like to, who has all of those issues. So they have one of them maybe, or they have one area which they're a bit think, oh, that's what I think about you. Yeah. To have them all is quite unusual. Normally there's a middle ground that I'll meet people on because I'm just there to listen. First of all, I mean, I have an empathetic approach to most of my conversations. I want to hear them out. Hear them out. Tell me how it is. What do you think? If it just says, oh, bloody green, well, that's not really a conversation. No. But if someone wants to stop and say, well, look, I'm worried that this will happen, we can walk through that together. Sometimes you go, yeah, that is going to be an impact on some part of your life. But I think that's not a bad thing. The key is that it's highlighted early enough and people are given the resources to adapt. So climate is one of those issues. If we don't adapt to that, we tell our children, like, time doesn't wait for you. If you sit on the floor, the soil will grow over you and life will carry on. You need to be able to keep moving, and I think that's the same as people do need to adapt, and we need to offer support for that. And that adaptation does have to come from government support, which has to come from tax regulation and from innovation being funded. And so we sort of have to invest early, and that does have to come from taxpayers, but we need to make sure it's coming from the right taxpayers for the right reasons. And I think that's why we're not just a party about the environment, because if you just say, let's take care of the environment, you turn around to a middle class who can't afford to send their children to daycare, they can't afford to get back into the workforce, they can't get the health requirements they need, or they're worried about paying the rent. You can't then ask them to come out on the weekend and plant trees. Yeah. They need to have a side job. They're driving around delivering food from McDonald's, on a Saturday and Sunday. And so that's what I learned in business. You can't say, turn up to work and work hard, please, and then send them home with less money they can live on. It just falls over. Yeah. And so I think that's the same when I engage with people, is I want to hear, let's actually solve your issue. I'm not just want to hear it out and say, well, at least you listen to me. So I think that's how, I wouldn't say deal with it, but that's what I enjoy doing. Is listening to someone's issue and going, yeah, how do we nut this out? How do we figure this out for you individually? And there are policies in place and there's support systems in place, but they could get better. Yeah. They could be more automatic. And I think that's what we need.
Now, the Green Party, some might say, is developing a reputation of imploding spectacularly sometimes. We had the recent example of Elizabeth Kerry and that whole thing. And we also had, a while back, James Shaw effectively been told that there's no confidence in him having to reapply for his job. Do you think that harms the party, this sort of public sort of all your dirty laundry being hung out publicly, or do you think it's what makes the party healthy?
Politics is public.
Yeah.
It should be. I think the last thing anyone want to hear is that a whole lot of changes happen inside, say, a party you're a member of that you didn't hear about.
Yeah.
And so what I'm confident is that the charter and the way that we run the party, and what I've seen change with the party over the last 3 years as we've updated all our policies and internal procedures, is they are working. It doesn't mean the people in them won't be offended and upset with the outcomes, or there'll be, say, intermediary issues that have to be resolved. But, you know, as we see here today, they've all been resolved. And I mean, to that point, no one's ever 100% happy. The point is that we can move on as a party.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we have a really confident caucus now. We have a group that really feels like they can move forward into the next election. And it's been a challenging 3 years. It's the second term in government. I mean, it's going to take a while to get, say, up to the level of the major parties, but it's dealt with at a flax roots level. Everyone has a voice within that conversation, and they're able to attend meetings and view online, however they need access, to see what's going on within the party.
Yeah.
And that's what's more important. The dirty laundry is dirty regardless. You know,
Yeah.
The idea is if you don't wash it, it stays there.
Because I've heard, you know, I mean, it must be exhausting, because I've heard like sometimes it's a very collective approach all the time, and sometimes you have like 200 people on a
Zoom. Yeah.
On a Zoom. I mean, how do you get things done?
They get done. That's the amazing thing. I mean, this is something that we've taken from a lot of their Te Ao Māori principles that have been enshrined now. Like it or not, it actually works really well. Sometimes, you know, there's an issue to solve on a marae. Everyone just hunkers down.
Yeah.
Let's resolve it. The idea of saying, well, let's bring 4 of you in, you can represent the 200 people, and you just chat with 50 people each and come up with an idea. That sounds efficient, but it actually then ends up down the road being looked at again going, no, we weren't asked. We didn't talk. You didn't come and see us. If the opportunity is there for the whole party, that it's bigger than just the MPs you see. The members of the party are the ones that are really critical. That's what drives the party. That's the people who give their time to actually drive these things forward, and they're passionate about seeing these larger kōrero within the party, because the result is a good result. And I've sat on many of those calls in the last 3 years, and what I see is a process that is more like you would want to see in a family, less like you want to see in a corporation.
Yeah.
And that means that actually, yes, it's messy, but you'll see effective MPs that come through and effective change that comes through in our party. And I believe that our members, no one's ever 100% happy, you know, with the process. But that's not to me, that's not a result. That just means someone was left really unhappy.
Yeah.
And so as we work through these things, everyone sees the party they're backing. So if people still want to support a party that does move for effective change on issues, but also is not hidden away within the way they manage the party politics themselves, then, you know, we're still a great party to back, and I'm confident in that.
So, now you mentioned about being out of cabinet, but out of the government, but having ministers. So, were they effective at all, James Shaw and Marama, and what benefits have come out of being in the coalition?
Yeah, look, still effective, but could have been so much more effective.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the issue that I'm sure the public understands, but many may not align so much, is that even when you have a minister, say, for example, with James Shaw's position in the current government, it is able to table, it is able to highlight, it is able to be a voice around the table, but it does not have the effective energy that it had in the first 3 years, in the first term. So we can still highlight the issues, and that we believe was still better than being completely outside government.
Yeah.
That was the options that were on the table for us. We simply didn't have the vote. We need a little more party vote to be able to do that, and that's why we're pushing for that this time. But we're more effective in government, and that's not for those who won't vote for Green, but those who may vote for Green. We're more effective when we're actually inside properly.
Yeah.
And that will allow us to do more of the things that we're proposing. And also, anything we're proposing, let's remember, we don't change government. Government changes government.
Yeah.
So we become a voice within the room, an effective voice. You'll never see one of our policies, nor will you see any party's policy just run out. Our system of democracy is awesome. It will work through its steps.
Yeah.
But someone's got to put out the big innovative ideas and have them chopped and changed and sculpted, and we need more parties doing that. And I mean, that's what the Greens are there to do, is to actually look at that social and environmental area and say, here's a big idea. Everyone, go to town on it. Give us your feedback.
Do you think the wealth tax was a a good idea, and how do you think it was received?
Yeah, I think it was received poorly. It's always received poorly, and no one ever wants to think they have to give up something that they weren't planning to.
Yeah.
You know, I think donations are wonderful, and we live in a society where it's supposed to trickle down, but it's trickling less and less. Clearly, statistically, I think we're at about 80-90% own the majority of the assets and the wealth in the country. 7% own the majority of the assets and the wealth in the country. So that's no middle. And when I look at people now and ourselves, everyone, we're paying mortgages, we have children going to school, we have all the same costs, they're increasing. We do need to see some other places that can be supporting those costs in times of need. And that's been shown through COVID and now through our current, I think we've just fallen into a technical recession. But it is a real recession based on coming out of these floods. There's more costs for people. Yeah, so I just think it's really an area that we do need to do more on.
Yeah. Now, people, obviously the election, it's almost too close to call now. Some people are saying a national act could get it, and then others are saying that Labour, Greens, with the help of Te Pāti Māori, it has been called the Coalition of Chaos.
It's quite a cool name, though.
But, I mean, it does... I mean, we chatted to Peter Dunn, the political commentator, and he says if they get in, we could be having another election in 18 months. Do you think that is a worry that Te Pāti Māori might bring sort of a bit of instability to it because they have some very firm views and aren't afraid to sort of speak them?
I suppose that concern is probably more around a majority Labour government. The Green Party works very effectively with Te Pāti Māori. We align more with more of those core values and principles than any other party. We allow possibly to be that conduit.
Yeah.
It's quite important to have someone in between.
Yeah.
And I think that's another place that the Green Party can be seen to be quite effective. Look, chaos to me is something that I've only ever lived and worked in, because if it's all ironed out and straightened out, well, nothing's changing. And this is not a time when nothing can be changing. We actually need to have multiple things happening all the time within government for us to reach a new resolution. We can't just tackle, let's say, one issue at a time, and every 6 months we'll bring up one more large issue we tabled. And there's actually a multitude of disasters and crises that are going on at the same time. So it will be chaotic, but the parties that are involved in that government, I'm confident, will not be chaos. They'll have far too much to get on with and are far too passionate to consider the idea of breaking apart a government in 18 months. But hey, I'm not the expert.
So what's your prediction? So obviously you want Chloe Schwalbrook to win her seat again. Are you going for any other seats? And what percent do you, as a party, want to get?
Well, we want to gain every additional percent we can on last time. I think we need to earn that. And that's exactly what we're here to do for the next 3 months. And we have been doing, showing we can do outside of cabinet. Chloe's seat is really realistically, the strongest seat we've got. We are a party vote party. And I believe that's good also for the way that we run our candidates, because effectively the list dictates whether or not you're in. We normally will see only a third of our list, maybe 25% of our list will get in, but you'll see all these other passionate candidates still going out there and doing the mahi for 3 months, knowing full well they will never get near government. So I think that's really important. I'm not a good one at taking bets. I'm not a gambler. But
so you won't say that it will be a Labour Green government?
I can say that that's the block I want. That's why I'm sitting in it, and that's what we're standing for.
Yeah.
But I think it would be relatively arrogant and have a bit too much hubris to assume that I know what voters want to do. I mean, our job is to get out there and tell them what we can do, and voters need to decide. But I want them to decide really succinctly this time, more than ever. Because this is the third term for a Labour Green and possibly Te Pāti Māori coming in to work together, and I'd like to see that be a really great, 9 years in government, and we do need to act faster on a lot of issues in this third term. Yeah.
Now, last question: what do you promise the people of Napier as the Green Party candidate?
I think continuity of connection. So, I mean, I'm contacted outside elections. So during the time I am the candidate, I'm here to answer any questions. I'm available anytime, any place, and I'm contacted during elections more than ever. But I stand as a member of the community, first and foremost. We live and work and play in this community. Outside of that, I won't be your MP, but I will be a really active member of your community, and I'll be here to help anyone who asks. And I think that's more important at a base level. I'd love to one day look at being an MP, but our priorities rely with our family, rely with our community directly. I think we've got good options. There are good options for the next MP for Napier. I just think people need to really clearly decide what party and parties they want to lead government. That's really the corner. So my promise is just I'll do what I say I'll do, but I'm not saying I'll do much, because what I'm here to do is support local community. So, get in touch if you need help, and I'll help.
James Crowe, Green Party candidate for Napier, thank you so much for your time. Thank you.